2009. I'm here with Richard Pearsall. So I'm going to ask you, what was it like growing up in the Great Depression?
Well, my father, actually it wasn't too bad for us. My father was the kind of guy that could do anything, and he did anything, you know. He was an auto mechanic, and we lived on Long Island at the time, and he worked on boats. He was a hustler. So the Depression, I remember it, and I remember it being pretty tough for a lot of people. But I think we made out pretty good. My father was an incredible man.
Right. And did you hear about it when Germany invaded Poland? What did you think of that?
Well, I was young, like you. Didn't think too much about it.
So where were you on December 7th, 1940?
December 7th, I lived in Lakeview, Long Island, and I remember going to church with my mother, and we met a lady, and she said to my mother, "Aren't you glad your son is," I guess I was 16 or something at the time, "that he's not, he's not old enough, he won't be going to this war." Everybody thought it was going to be over in a month or two, you know.
And then you turned 17 and you joined the Navy.
I joined the Navy.
So why the Navy?
Well, living on Long Island, I was always on boats and growing up, and it was just all my buddies went in the Navy also from school.
So, do you serve with them throughout your friends, or did you get to meet new people?
Yeah, we all kind of joined up together, but we all went in different directions. So I was with none of them, so I just made new friends.
And you went to the Pacific Theater, that's right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Well, first when we got on, the ship I was actually on the ship before the ship was commissioned, before it belonged to the Navy. I went down, and I was so anxious to get on the ship, they asked for volunteers for a working party, so I went down as a working party, and I was on the ship before it was commissioned. After it was commissioned, we went on a shakedown cruise to Trinidad, and of course through the Panama Canal and out to Pearl Harbor.
What did you do?
I was what they call a yellow shirt on the flight deck. I directed aircraft. It's not like it is today. Today the airplane lands, and if he doesn't catch a cable, he can keep right on going. Those days, the aircraft carrier was just a straight ship. It didn't have that angle deck that they have now. And when the planes landed, they had to be parked up in the front, in the bow. Been off too long. And when the planes landed, I helped direct them forward to park them. And in the taking off, they were all parked in the aft end of the flight deck. And my job was to get them out of their parking place up to the officer that was launching them.
So what kind of airplanes did you see?
We had F4Us, it was a Corsair. We had TBM Avengers, we had F6 Hellcats, and then we performed some tests for the Navy on the F7 and the F8, which were later on. Actually, the F8 was after the war.
So, did you ever get to see any combat?
Yes. The Battle of Okinawa, you don't hear much about it. It was kind of, the Battle of Okinawa was a catastrophe. And they were even going to have some congressional investigations as to why it went the way it did. But when they dropped the atom bomb and the war was over, that was all forgotten about. But the Battle of Okinawa was the largest air-sea battle in modern warfare. Not the largest sea battle, not the largest air battle, and not the largest land battle, but the combination, it was incredible. There were 1,700 ships at the invasion of Okinawa, which is actually bigger than D-Day in Normandy that you hear about in Europe all the time. And there were over 1,000 Japanese, over 100,000 Japanese civilians killed on Okinawa, and over 100,000 Japanese troops. And the Navy took a tremendous beating at Okinawa with all the Japanese kamikaze planes. I mean, there were so many targets for them out there with 1,700 ships they couldn't miss.
So when you said that was kind of a disaster, how'd that make you feel about your leaders?
Excuse me?
And you mentioned that you felt that was like a disaster.
Well, actually, at the time, you don't think about it being a disaster. You know just what's going on. And you actually find out about it after it's all over, just exactly what happened.
And how'd that make you feel about your leaders?
Later on, like now, and after I got out of the Navy, and really, you don't know all this, that you see what's going on, but you don't understand the whole picture. And after you get out and think about it, you wonder, well, what happened here? Why did this happen? But at the time when it's going on, you're not wondering what is happening. You're only in your particular area.
So where were you on the day they dropped the atom bomb?
We were off the coast. We were off the coast of Japan, off the home island. We were off the coast of Tokyo when they dropped the atom bomb. Now the atom bomb has a reputation, and people say, should we have dropped that bomb? Definitely, because they had hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of suicide boats and suicide airplanes and everything else that was going to be an absolutely their last ditch stand. We would have lost millions of people. It was definitely the right thing to do.
So after the war was over, what did you do?
After the war was over, first thing I did was get married. I got a job in a company that sold heavy equipment, and I stayed there for 40 years. Worked for the same man for 40 years till I retired.
So is there any stories you would like to tell about World War II? So is there anything else you'd like to add about World War II?
Well, my position on, they had to catch the cables. My position on the flight deck, I actually stood in those cables. And the plane caught the cable with the tail hook. And that was my job to direct and flow it. So 20,000 landings we had when I left the ship. And every one of those airplanes went right past my right ear. So I don't hear very well out of that ear. And those planes were only, the wingtip was like from here to your father. I was right by those airplanes when they landed. But I actually liked what I was doing. It was one of the greatest jobs on an aircraft carrier is to be a yellow shirt director. Because you're actually in charge of everything. You can tell anyone if he doesn't belong here, get out of there. Even no matter if his rate was way higher than mine, I can tell him you don't belong here if you move.
So when the airplane's going right by ear, it sounds like a scary job at first.
Well, it's the most dangerous job in the world. It still is today. It's a little bit different today. Today you don't get hit with a propeller. Today you get sucked into the intake of a jet. And it does happen. You figure you have, well, the flight decks we have now they're about 5 acres. Ours were probably about 2 acres. we had 100 airplanes, and then maybe now they only have maybe 50 or 75. They don't carry as much as they used to. Of course, the airplane of today can do what 5 could do. It's very loud, a lot of activity. Everything is done with hand signals because you can't hear a single thing. Now, I said 20,000 landings, which is nothing compared to some of them which had 40 and 50,000 landings that were out there from the very beginning of the war. So we didn't get out there till Okinawa.
So what's your best memory of the war?
Best memory of the war? We were anchored in Tokyo Bay. Tokyo Bay. Oh, let me go back a little bit. Do you know who Kilroy is? Remember Kilroy? They were making it. It was a thing where you would just see like a wall, 2 fingers and just a head. People would draw it, and it was Kilroy was here. We pulled into Tokyo Bay shortly after the war was over, and at the entrance to Tokyo Bay is 2 giant concrete pillars that go way up high, and they're huge. Now this is only maybe a couple of weeks after the war is over. And there's 2 big signs there. Kilroy was here. On those concrete poles. And then one of the good memories is when we anchored in Tokyo Bay, the loudspeaker come over and they asked me to report to the quarterdeck. That's where people come aboard the ship. We were anchored there. And there was a friend of mine that I went to school with. He knew I was on that ship and his ship was anchored there. And somehow he got over and he met me there. I thought that was pretty neat. But I'm still in touch with a lot of guys from the ship that we're on email, and we have a reunion every year. I don't go every year because they have them in San Diego or Florida, but if they're within driving distance, we usually go. Like they have one in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania or someplace we go. And the ship was in commission for 27 years. And we had a company of 3,200 men, plus the air department, plus the air wing. That was a couple hundred guys in that air group, probably. And because the ship was in commission for 37 years and had so many on board, there's a lot of people went through that ship, thousands and thousands of guys over 27 years. So we have a pretty good group at the reunions. We get 200 or 300. Well, it was only maybe 15 or 20 of the original crew that's even left. So I'm still in touch with some of them by email, almost daily by email.
You mentioned Kilroy as a propaganda. They had like lots of propaganda out there. Do you believe it all, or?
Well, they had at that time they had Tokyo Rose, and she would come on with some propaganda, and you wouldn't believe it. But Tokyo Rose knew exactly what was going on because she would, when a new ship would arrive in the Pacific, she would welcome them. You know, welcome to the Pacific. Tokyo Rose was the voice for the Japanese propaganda. No, you didn't. I met Admiral McCain. He was the Admiral McCain. This John McCain that just ran for president would be his grandson.
Did you meet any other interesting people?
Hmm?
Did you meet any other interesting people?
No, that's about the only one. When we were at Okinawa, we were the flagship. The flagship is the one that carries the admiral. That's about it. And sometimes other admirals, like I saw Bull Falls, they would come to visit at a time and discuss whatever's going to carry out a plan or something. And I did meet Henry Fonda. I met Henry Fonda. I went to school. When I first joined the Navy, I went to school in Oklahoma for an aviation machinist mate. And after school, they sent me to Quonset Point, Rhode Island for a while. That's where I met him up there, Quonset Point.
exciting.
That's about it.
That was Richard Pearsall.